Hello, this is Professor Robert Needing, and I'll be teaching Math 168 to you. This is the first series in many of statistics, and we're going to be covering Section 1, the structure of data. So the recommended methodology for doing this is that you download the PPTX file, which is inside of your modules in Canvas, and either follow along and annotate digitally, if you can do that, or do that mechanically, whichever way, by printing and then just simply writing on top of the slides. I prefer to do mine digitally. I also prefer to use an iPad if possible, and use an iPad pencil and write on top of it, but we'll do what we got to do here. So let me clear myself out of the area here so that I'm off to the side, and let's go ahead and let's do some talk. So let's talk about data and what data actually is, what it consists of, that kind of thing. So statistics, when we study statistics, what we're really talking about is data. We're looking at numbers, we're analyzing numbers, and we're seeing how things compute in the real world. Do they make sense? What we're trying to do is introduce logic into the system and take out personal feeling. When we describe data, we summarize it and visualize it. We'll do quite a bit of that at the beginning of this course. And then we'll analyze data. By analyzing data, we're looking at it again to see what applicable places we can give data in the real world. So the collection, the describing, the analyzing, and what we will look at with inside this course. Data is everywhere. You really can't get away from data, whether you like it or not. Everybody wants to talk about what percentage of people feel one way, or how many people do something else, or they want to base everything on a poll or a sampling, and then they want to discuss what our lives are like based on the fact that the data which is collected. We live in a society in which data is collected every second. Right now that I'm on this computer, someone somewhere is collecting data on me of the different tabs and the different sites I have open and the different applications or extensions that I'm utilizing. So I am part of, and you are part of right now, data collection. You'll almost definitely have it to make decisions based on data, evaluate decisions, and someone else has made based on data. Like I said, it's already happening right now. So what do we learn in statistics? Well, we learn, first of all, the descriptive part. And the descriptive part is going to happen to us in chapters 1 and 2, where we'll take data, we'll form pictures, histograms, bar charts, pie charts, things like this. Talk about means, medians, modes. Then we'll make inferences. And we'll do this in chapter 3, 4. We'll do this in the P sections. And in this particular section, we'll talk about samples, and we'll say something about the population as a whole. And then we'll discuss probability. And in probability, basic probability, we'll do that in section P1. I have to stall for 1 second because I have to do a battery charge. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, hopefully that wasn't obtrusive for you. I had to do a little battery switching over there on my pen. So when we talk about data, data is the set of measurements taken on a set of individual units. When we go into a group and we pull out some samplings and we take some data on that, then that data is what we take, and these individual units are what we take, and they're the individual cases, if you will. Usually data is stored and presented in a data set, and we'll see one in a second. It's comprised of variables, which are measured on cases, and cases are the individual components of the data set. We take a sample, and notice that right there, a lot of times in the slides and things you will see, let me switch over to, I can do a little marking up here and give you a little color and pick something here, and okay. That when we talk about something in here, for instance, like this S value right here, sample, we have it highlighted in a blue color so that you can see what's going on with that. Okay, so take a look at that and make sure that you notice that. So that means something for us. We find in a sample that we find a statistic, and a statistic is a pretty important piece of vocabulary. And you'll notice in this course that we love vocabulary, and it's because we have to. In that a statistic comes from a sample, and that's the qualification you want to make right here on that one. When we move to a population is the large group. And when we find a population statistic, we call it a parameter. A parameter comes from a population, and a statistic comes from a sample. says you'll learn these meanings in chapter 3. Now here's a data set. And this data set has multiple pieces to it. And so let's talk about some of the parts of this data set. For instance, every row that you see, every row, for instance, this row here, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, row 7, row 8, those are all, and if you look back in the data set when we talk about things, these are all cases. The cases are in rows across the data set. So row 2 is a case, and row 3 is a case, and row 4 is a case. Then when we move to the columns, column B, column C, column D, those are the variables. And each one of these variables that we can see takes on some kind of different value. And we'll talk about those different values within inside of those here in a second. Every one of the pieces that you see inside of here, for instance, this 2.6 that I'm going to box out, this is a statistic for this fourth case. The fourth case has a statistic of 2.6 for the variable GPA. And make sure if you need to play that back, play that back. But this is my statistic for this case in this variable. Cases and variables. It says we obtain information about cases or units. The units, the subjects of the study. I prefer to use the cases because I think it's a little bit more applicable to what we're talking about. The variable is any characteristic that is recorded for each case. All of these variables, GPA, sibling, height, weight, exercise, TV, these are all variables which are measured for the associated cases. And the numbers that, or the responses that are in there are, for each of them, are a statistic. All right. So it says we obtain information about the case or the unit, the subject of the study. A variable is this is the characteristic within the recording for the case. It says we generally record the information for each case in a row. The variables generally respond to the columns in the data set. In the previous example, sorry, you have blank variables and blank cases. Okay, so if I go back up here, and let's just go with the variables that we can actually see. Now, first of all, this is a variable. You're either a senior, a sophomore, a junior, a first year. You responded to this. Case number 2 responded here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 12 variables that I can see. I think there's another one over here, but we're not going to say anything about that. So right here, I'm going to put 12. I have 12 variables that I can actually see. I think I need to make that a little bit larger, right? How about an 18? 18, maybe bigger. How about 30? 30 is a little bit better, isn't it? Okay, 12. And when I go to the number of cases, okay, well, let's go back up again, and you can see down, so number 1 is not actually a case. Number 2 is the first case that we actually have going on here, okay? So I can think we can say safely there's 20 lines here, but 20 minus the first one is going to be 19. There are going to be 19 cases that I can actually see here. So you count your cases in your rows, you count your variables in your columns. Now, categorical versus quantitative. A categorical variable divides a case into groups, whereas a quantitative variable measures a numerical quantity for each number. Now that's important. So if we go back here and we look at the first one, you picked from a list here in order to give this response, categorical. From gender, you come down through gender. Again, you picked from a list, categorical. Higher SAT, that was a list, categorical. Now, when we get to SAT, you typed in a number. Typing in of a number for this is quantitative. GPA, quantitative. Number of siblings, quantitative. Height, quantitative. Weight, Quantitative. I'm assuming this is hours of exercise. Quantitative. Number of TVs owned. Quantitative. Pulse. Quantitative. And when we get to award, here it is again. It's a list. I see the same things repeated over and over again. Categorical. And we just kind of went over each one of those. So if you look at your year in school, again, you're talking about something that's a category, right? You're picking from a category. A gender, a category. Anytime the list is sitting here and you're able to pick from the list, it's a categorical. Anytime now you just can't say just because it's a number that it's a quantitative, because it's not. I'm giving you, there could be a 1210 and there could be a 1211. So any number that I return is going to be a quantitative. But if that number comes from a group that I'm picking from, for instance, if I pick in the group of ages 20 to 30, that's a group, that's a category. That's not a quantitative value. For each of the following situations, what are the cases? What are the variable, categorical, or quantitative? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Look at number one. So when I look at number one, it says people in a city are asked if they support a new recycling law. Well, first of all, and I'm going to think I should change my color maybe to something else so we can see it a little bit better here. First of all, let's pick out what are the cases. So let's cases. Okay, so the question is, who's being asked this? Well, people in the city is who's being asked. So it's people in the city. There's my categorical response, or my case response, excuse me. Now, I'm also supposed to, what is the variable? Is the variable quantitative? Is the variable categorical? So they're asked if they respond. So, well, the answer is yes, or the answer is no, correct? One of those. So if you're going to answer one of those, that's a categorical. I'm just going to write cat for categorical. I'm not the best typer in the world. Number two, collect data from a sample of 200 teenagers. Okay, well, right away, my case value here is going to be 200 teenagers. Those are going to be my cases. In those cases, now I have to answer the question, do you eat at least 5 servings a day of fruit and vegetables? The question isn't how many you eat. The question is, do you eat, yes or no? So again, it's categorical. This could be the kind of a question you're going to see on Wiley. And that's why mine was marked Wiley number 10 in the section. Yours may be a different number, but you'll see something close to it. Estimate the bending strength of beams by bending 10 beams. Okay, well, our case is 10 beams. The question we're being asked is to record the actual breaking strength. Well, every one of them could have a different breaking strength. This is not a categorical kind of thing. So this is a quantitative. When I have this quantitative response, I'm going to deliver back maybe 10.2 pounds, 10.1 pounds. This is going to be something which is not just simply picked from a list. When we talk about an explanatory and a response, if we're using one variable to help understand the prediction of another, we call the former, meaning the one that happens first, the explanatory variable, and the one which happens latter, or the one that responds, the response variable. You can kind of think about this like X and Y. If you remember your days from pre-algebra and algebra, when we give an explanatory X variable, we look for a response Y variable. Explanatory has to take place first, and a response will happen second. I'm going to write that down for you. First, and the response has to happen second. And I'll move that a little bit so you can see it. Example, does medication help reduce stress? Okay, so when we look at medication express, we're looking for which one's explanatory and which one's the response. So you would not reduce stress to try to explain meditation, but you would use meditation possibly to help explain stress. So therefore, the meditation, I think first, yep, meditation is my explanatory. I wanted to move that a little bit. And my reduce in stress is going to be my response. And maybe, quite frankly, I should probably underline that. So the meditation and the reduce in stress. When I go to the next one, does sugar consumption increase hyperactivity? So what you think about is which one has to happen first. It's got to be the sugar consumption that takes place first. It's got to be the hyperactivity that possibly happens second. So when we take a look at those, then we are looking at the explanatory. Too bad I can't copy that thing. Maybe I can't copy that thing. I'm going to try and do this. Hold on. Bear with me while I try it. Didn't work, did it? Okay. So I'm moving it. So it becomes the explanatory possibly, and the response becomes a hyperactivity. Again, first, second. We have a couple variables here, and I would encourage you to pause the video right now for a couple minutes. Go through, try to answer these. Once you answer these, then turn the video back on again, and then I'll go over them and I'll give you some answers. So hopefully you did well. Hopefully you went through these. So let me underline a couple of things first before we start in the text boxing area here. So I have to find something happens first and something happens second. Eating yogurt a day can cause you to lose weight. Okay, so eating yogurt and lose weight. So if I go into there and I say, okay, fine, eating yogurt has to happen first, that's going to be my explanatory. And losing weight is what I would think I'm going to predict. That would be my response. I go down to the next one. To get a good grade in statistics class, you must study hard. Okay, well, hold on a second. I don't get a good grade and then go study. I study first, and then I'm hoping for a good grade. So in this one, the direction or the way they come to us first and second is not exactly laid out. In here, I have my explanatory, which happens second in the sentence. And then here, I have my response. Don't look for the first and second always to be first and second inside of the sentence. Blood alcohol content, BAC, the number of alcoholic drinks. So you can already infer, I hope, that it's the number of drinks which drive the BAC. So the number of drinks are my explanatory, and the BAC is my response. Texting in class, meanwhile, professors lecturing and poor exam grade. So I crack up when I don't write some of these, and I crack up with them, and we have some professors who are really, really angry about this, and it's part of life, I guess. Okay, so texting in class while the professor's lecturing and a poor exam rate. Okay, so poor exam grade is something that might happen if you're not paying attention because you're too busy texting in class. So therefore, the texting in class you should have down as the explanatory, and the poor exam grade is going to be the response. In summary, data are everywhere we look. It pertains to a wide variety of topics. The data is usually comprised of variables which are measured on cases. The variables are either categorical or quantitative. Get really good at picking out the categorical and the quantitative. And once you pick out categorical and quantitative, then start to look for explanatory and response. Data can be used to provide information about essentially anything we are interested in and want to collect data on. Hope this was a refreshing topic for you. When you come back, we're going to be in section 1.2, and we'll carry this conversation forward into taking data from a population.